Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video. I'm really excited today to bring you what is an updated setup video really. The last setup video I done was just as I hit 1,000 subs. So I thought it's a way to celebrate really, this 5,000 subscriber mark that we've now hit. I thought I'd do an updated one because I've changed a couple of things. And for you kind of hardcore fans of the channel, you know that I've changed bike recently. So what I'm going to go through in this video is this is mostly just for 250s. I'm not sure how well it will apply to the 450s and such, just because the bikes are different weights. But I'm going to go through every single one of my settings. So that's the buttons I use on my controller, that's my camera settings, that's my lean settings, brake settings, and my suspension, everything. So you feel free to kind of skip through to what bits you want of this video. But at the end of the video, I'm going to show you how you can take what is my setup on the Kawasaki, which is what I'll be basing this whole video off of, and showing you just really what to do to apply it to any of the other 250s that you like, just to kind of get the best results. So without further ado, thank you and enjoy. Right, so to get us started, this setup really can be used on any track. You know, I revert to this setup for the National Series and the Supercross Series, and it's given me a couple of wins in both, so it's more than capable of being taken and applied to any sort of track. And I feel like it's a very, very good base to build off of, whether you're just learning the game or you've got hundreds of hours. It doesn't differ too much on the stability side of things from the default settings of the game, which I think will help a lot of the newer players. And the suspension itself, whilst I'm not a suspension wizard and I'm not 100% sure what I'm kind of looking at everywhere, I've spent a little bit of time in testing, kind of going from one extreme to the other on different settings, and I found a middle ground for me which I feel I can rely upon, and I know how the bike is going to react going from track to track, which I think is what you really want out of your setup, is to know exactly what it will do in different situations. Right, so first things first, let's get into the actual behind the scenes settings. So I'm going to go through each of these input tabs, and I'll very quickly go through the graphics and such that I've got as well. So on input tab 1, you can see down the left hand side here, I've got all of my different buttons set out. What I will do is I will quickly go through, well, not right now, in a second I will go through with a controller overlay just to kind of press the buttons so you can see what's what, so you get a better idea of what I'm doing at separate times. And it's also worth mentioning that I do play with the claw grip. If you don't know what that is, just Google it and you'll be like, what on earth, how is he holding his controller like that? But that's just how I kind of learned to play games really, so that's just how I play, it's what works best for me. So on this screen I'm going to go through my lean settings first. This hasn't changed from the last video, so if you haven't watched, or if you have watched the last video, just skip past this bit. If you haven't, I run dead zone on 2. That's just so if you've got a slightly dodgy controller analog stick, you're not veering side to side ever so slightly all the time. So it's just got that tiny bit of dead zone to give for a little bit of leeway. Linearity I've got on 150. The reason for this is it's what feels best for me to progressively lean into the corners and get set up and flow around the corners nicely. Again, I've got it set to smooth because I play on a controller, not keyboard and mouse, and it's just what's recommended on the game. Not a whole lot sure what all the press and the gain settings do. When I first got the game, I already had a friend that played it. He gave me his settings, and that's what I've run with since day one, really. I believe direct lean is stock at 50, maybe. Someone correct me if I'm wrong. And I also run combined brakes. I've got 2 brake buttons. One brake button is for both front and brake combined. One is just for the rear brake. And I've got these set to 10 and 100% as well, just because I feel like it gives me enough braking power, but without locking up the wheels too much. The next drop down I've got here is for the throttle. I think this is just 100% standard. I've not changed anything on the throttle at all. One thing that I feel like I'm quite good at is being able to modulate the throttle pretty well, have good throttle control. That's just something that will come with time as you play the game more. Feel free to mess around with this if you need to. Maybe put a dead zone on there, change the linearity, maybe make it smoother. But that part is up to you. I myself just run default settings. The first brake tab I have changed ever so slightly. This is just to help me have more control under the braking so I don't lock up as much, especially on those combined brakes that I have. I run, the top 2 options are standard, I believe, 0 and 100. I've then got smooth on to help me progressively brake, so I don't just jam on the brakes and slide into the corner. Press is 30, release is 10, gain is 80.1. Again, all of the ins and outs of these settings, I'm not 100% sure. I'm by no means the Wikipedia of MX bikes. I just change a few settings here or there and it works well for me. So again, I would advise, if this doesn't work for you, just have a little play around with things, to be honest. Just make sure you save your other settings before moving on. For the rear brake drop down, again, I believe the first two settings are stock. I've smoothed out the brake as well by pressing that smooth filter there, and again I've changed the values there so slightly. It just helps me not lock up as much going into corners, because I'm a big advocate of trying to be smooth and controlled in this game to help you go as fast as possible. The clutch here is absolutely standard, I believe. I don't think you have to change anything on that at all. I just have a button clutch, so I only use it on the start. I've got shift help on, so I haven't got to press the clutch every time that I want to change gear. The rider forwards and back lean is absolutely stock, so no need to change that at all. And I believe the same applies here for the left and right lean. I myself personally don't use the left and right lean, just how I learned to play the game. So this is one setting that you may have to experiment with yourself if you do use it. I will get into the Input 2 tab in a second when I'm going through with my controller overlay on as well. But the Input 3 tab, absolutely everything is stock on this, no changes at all. That's purely for the replay camera, so no need to change anything there. For my graphics, I try and run things fairly high, you know, just to make the videos look good. I turn reflections off because that does have a big impact on FPS when I'm in like full lobbies whilst trying to record. I also turn 3D grass off because it makes some of the Nationals tracks have like these like dirt clumps that don't look too appealing when you're riding. Good for screenshots, but not when you're riding at all. Not too much to say about the rest of the screen. You can kind of copy those down if you need to. My miscellaneous settings, there's not much to change in here. Volumes, whatever you want it to be. I'm from the UK, so I run the day, month, year format. Don't slate me in the comments, please. That's just what we do. I've turned chat off just because it's not too enjoyable. It's seeing all the spam whilst you're trying to ride and concentrate. And you'll see the bandwidth for the top right. I usually run it maxed out, but I've changed it to medium recently. And the reason is it loads in players, well, it doesn't load in players really far away from you, which again helps with FPS. So you're not loading as many players constantly around the track at the same time. And then finally on the simulation tab, my field of view is 110. I've not done anything fancy with a field of view behind the scenes. I know you can make it bigger, but I'm comfortable on this. Tilt is 0, pitch is 31, and when you're in game, if you press the Shift and C button, you can use the arrow keys to slide your rider back, press it again, move them all the way down to get as much of a field of view as possible. I've got the shift help on. All that means is I haven't got to press the clutch or let off the throttle every time, or manually, every time I shift up or down. I've got automatic clutch on, so when I come to a stop, I can just pull away again without the fear of stalling. I've got brake help, just to stop me locking up quite as much. You do still lock up a bit, but it's not quite as wild. The automatic rider dab, I believe, is again when you come to a stop, you don't just fall over because your rider puts his foot down. And the automatic tyre change is just when you go back to the pits and then go to the track again, whether it be testing or in a server, it just gives you a fresh set of tyres, which will help give you more traction overall. So I've now got my controller overlay on, and you'll be able to see I'm going to kind of move the controller as I go through the settings. So I've got my lean on the left stick going left and right. I've got my throttle on the right trigger. I have got my brake on the left trigger. That's my combined brakes. That does both front and back at the same time. My rear brake by itself is on L1, or is that R right bumper on Xbox, sorry. My clutch is on my circle button. My forward and back lean is on the right stick. And the left and right lean I would use on the right stick, but I don't use it, so I've just got it bound to the keyboard so I don't press anything by mistake. My shift up button is triangle. My shift down button is square. This is something that is made a lot easier by playing claw. I can use my index finger to reach over and press those a bit easier. My push bike is up on the D-pad. That's to push the bike forwards, and again to push the bike backwards is down. Sitting, I sit with my right thumbstick, clicking it down. I've got that direct button ticked. What that means is when I hold the button, I'm sat down. When I let go of the button, I'm stood up. It's not like a toggle on or off. To reset my bike, I've got it set as the share button on my controller, so that's just to respawn. The track marker, if you hold down the options button on my controller, it sets a marker. If you press it once, it will spawn you at that marker, and that's just for testing. It will do that if you didn't know that bit of information. To look back, I use the touchpad. Again, it's fairly easy for me just to quickly press that button whilst I'm riding. Heading is to look left and right, so as I'm going off the start I can look left and right on the D-pad to see if anyone's right beside me. Tear off is click down the L3 button, and my raise arm is on R1. That's just to say sorry or thank you if you get together with someone or they let you pass. And then finally I've just got my trick button on X, and you can do any sorts of tricks that you want there. And that will actually do it for all of these settings, so now I will move on to the suspension. Right, so suspension time. I'm using the KX250 just as a base for this. I will show you after kind of what I do to apply it to different bikes. Fuel is always just whatever you want to run. The less fuel you run, the faster the bike will go. Front tyre pressure, I run at 11.6. Standard is 12.3. The reason I do this is I feel like it stops my front end tucking quite as much. All of these leverage, you can't really do much with this, but I leave it as standard anyway. The suspension itself, if I compare it with default actually, you'll see that the rear is absolute stock. Nothing changed at all. I have no issue with it. The front, I've changed to being fairly soft compared to standard. I kind of went from one extreme to the other, from very soft front to very hard front, and I find that just having it a bit softer stops the front end tucking quite as much for me, and it just gives me a better feel overall. Again, as I said at the start, I'm no suspension genius. Someone might look at this and think it's absolutely disgusting, but this is what I run. It works best for me on both Supercross and Motocross, and the only time it will ever give me any grief at all is if you're maybe 20 minutes deep into the second moto of Nationals and you're trying to go too fast. The front end might try and tuck a little bit, but if you're riding smart, it should give you no issues at all. The drivetrain, this is a big thing for me. I find that you get used to, well, your muscle memory gets used to how and when you change gears. Regardless of bike, I try and keep these speeds per gear the same. So on the KX, for example, this is 1350. If I go over to the TM, to get as close to these speeds per gear as possible, I have to run 1452. So it's just worth maybe taking a picture when you go from one bike of what your speeds are, and then replicate that as close as you can really to another bike. That's the best tip I can give you on that. That will help you not take quite as long to get used to each bike. It will feel a bit more natural. And going on to the last tab here, I have always run the swing arm length at 2. It's just something I got told when I first got the game. I believe it stops the bike's wheeling as much, makes the bike a bit more stable. I think the only thing it kind of negatively impacts is how tightly you can turn. And then on the mapping, I run aggressive, just mostly for Supercross, trying to get out of the bowl turns and try and triple out of corners as much as possible. And as I said before, I'm fairly good when it comes to throttle control, so usually isn't an issue for me sliding out at all. And that will do it on the suspension side of things for this. What I will do now is quickly load up the TM that I've just started riding, and really just show you how I kind of replicate like for like. Right, so I'm on the TM now, and you'll see when it comes time to switching from one bike to the other, you can't just copy like you do from track to track from the same bike. So all I did at the time was I just took a couple pictures of each slide, and I tried replicating them as much as I could on the TM. So you see I'm on 11.6 litres of fuel, 11.6 tyre pressure again. I've tried replicating the back as close as possible to the KX. I've got the front as close as possible. You'll see the drivetrain, as I mentioned earlier, I run 1350 on the KX. However, to get as close to the speed or miles per hour per gear, I've had to change this to 1452 just to make it feel as much like it as possible. And then you'll see in the others, on rod length, I think it's 128 on the KX. I can't remember completely, but the lowest I can go is 141 on the TM. See, I'm clicking it and it does nothing else. So this is what I mean about getting it as close as you can. You won't always get it spot on the different bikes as they have different values. But to me, that is the best way of feeling more comfortable quicker on each individual bike. Obviously, all bikes have their pros and cons. I've only just changed their TM recently just because I think it looks good. No reason other than that. It is actually slower than the KX. It weighs more and it's got one less horsepower. So yeah, that will conclude the video really. I just want to end off again by saying thank you for all the support. As I say, it's been about 3 months that I've been trying to do this properly now, and we've got from 100 subs all the way up to 5,000, which is just nuts. 5,000 was my goal for the end of the year. I'm probably going to move that to maybe about 7,000 now. Obviously, as the subs will slow down as the months go on. We've got about 4 months left until the end of the year, so I think 7,000 is probably a nice goal to aim for, and hopefully we can get there. And I hope you've enjoyed the video. Please leave a like and comment if you have any questions below. I'll try and answer them, or someone else in the comments will answer them as best as they can. And subscribe if you haven't done so already. I try and post every single day. 90% of it is MX Bikes content, but I occasionally branch out to some different motocross games as well. Thank you again for watching. Hope you have a lovely day, and until I catch you guys next time, peace.
Got bad shit all up in my mind right now. Fucking give me a minute and I'ma let it all out. I don't give a shit about an opinion, be another dimension when I wake up, wake up, wake up. Bitch, it's time to fill the cup. Got no fucking love, I feel so stuck.